I never thought the person trying to scam my family would be my sister's wedding planner, and I definitely didn't think she'd try to pull it off by lying to me. But the thing is, she didn't know one very important detail. I owned the venue. It started with a phone call I almost ignored. I was in the middle of work, answering emails and prepping a report when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but for some reason I answered this one. The woman on the other end introduced herself in a cheerful, overly polished tone, like someone who's used to smiling while lying through their teeth. "Hi, this is Carly. I'm Amanda's wedding planner. I just wanted to touch base about a bit of a hiccup we've run into with the venue." The way she said hiccup made my stomach twist. She kept going before I could say a word. "Unfortunately, there's been some adjustments on the venue side. Price increases, premium vendor delays, unavoidable stuff, you know how it goes. The short version is, we're going to need an additional $50,000 to secure everything. But I'm confident if we act fast, we can still keep the date. We just need that payment in the next 48 hours. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there stunned, trying to decide if this woman was brave, stupid, or just incredibly unlucky. Because what she didn't know, what Amanda never bothered to mention, was that the venue she was talking about, the one she was claiming had increased its prices, was mine. Not in a "my company manages it" kind of way. I own the land. I built it from scratch. I'm the legal owner of the entire event space. And the idea that some outsider had the nerve to try and bill my family an extra $50,000 for something I personally manage was beyond insulting. It was infuriating. But I didn't let her hear that in my voice. Instead, I asked a few calm, neutral questions, just enough to keep her talking. She threw in some vague jargon about vendor markups and holiday season premiums, all clearly made up on the spot. She wrapped it all in fake concern, saying she'd hate to see my sister lose her dream wedding, but things were moving fast and she needed a decision. She even offered a planner discount if I wired the money directly to her instead of going through the venue. Bold. Ridiculously bold. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall for a long moment. It wasn't just that Carly had tried to scam us. It was that Amanda hadn't told her who I was. It confirmed what I'd always suspected. In our family, I was invisible. Amanda had always been the center of attention, the golden child. I was the quiet one, the tech nerd, the guy they assumed was doing something with computers but never really bothered to ask about. I'd spent years building my business, expanding from software into hospitality, then into event venues. No one in my family even knew the full extent of it. So yeah, Carly didn't know who I was. But Amanda didn't really know either. I picked up the phone again and called Alex, my general manager at the venue. He's sharp, responsible, the kind of guy who doesn't let anything slide. I asked him if there had been any updates to Amanda's wedding booking. Any changes, additional fees, or vendor issues. He pulled up the account while we were still on the phone. "Nope," he said. "Everything's locked in. Paid in full, approved family discount. Zero outstanding balance." I told him what Carly had just tried to pull, and he let out a long sigh. "I had a weird feeling about her," he said. "She's been asking around, trying to get vendors to fudge invoices or cut side deals. Tried to convince our florist to submit 2 separate invoices, one for the client, one for records. Total red flag behavior." I told him to leave it to me. I didn't want to spook her, not yet. 2 days later, I drove out to the venue without telling anyone. I wanted to see Carly in action, to observe how she behaved when she thought no one important was watching. I wore casual clothes, nothing flashy, and walked in like a client doing a tour. What I saw confirmed everything. Carly was standing in the middle of the reception hall, snapping at one of the decorators for not using the right tone of gold on the table runners. She was nitpicking the caterer's menu and scolding a photographer for suggesting a daylight shoot. But what really made my blood boil was how she talked about my sister. "I mean, bless her heart," she said loudly to one of the makeup artists. "But Amanda has no taste. Her family's cheap and clueless, and I'm basically doing charity work at this point." I stepped forward and said, calmly but clearly, "Hi, Carly. Can we talk for a moment?" She turned, halfway through sipping her overpriced coffee, and stared at me like I'd just spoken Martian. "I'm in the middle of," she started, but I cut her off. "I'm the owner of this venue. We need to talk. Now." Her expression shifted instantly, like someone yanked the air out of her lungs. She followed me into the private office without another word. By the time I shut the door behind us, I already had all the evidence I needed. What I wanted now was the truth, or at least her attempt at spinning it. What I got was stammering. Excuses. She claimed it was all a miscommunication, said Amanda had misunderstood the costs. Then she tried to act offended, like I was insulting her professionalism. I slid a folder across the desk, copies of the original contract, proof of payment, a list of vendor invoices with her forged notes, and statements from 2 vendors she had tried to bribe. She didn't say another word. I leaned back in my chair and said, "You're done here. You're not part of this wedding anymore. You're banned from the property. If I hear from you again or you contact any vendors, I'll press charges for fraud." She walked out of the building in silence, passing every single vendor and staff member who had heard her nonsense just a few minutes earlier. She didn't even try to hold her head high. But as satisfying as that moment was, it was only the beginning. Because Amanda still had no idea what her planner had done, or who had just saved her wedding from becoming a $50,000 disaster. And I had a feeling that conversation was going to be even more complicated than kicking Carly out. I didn't rush to tell Amanda what happened because deep down, I wanted to see if she'd bring it up herself. I wanted her to say something like, "Hey, Carly just quit out of nowhere," or "Something weird happened with the venue." But no, the family chat kept buzzing as if nothing had changed. Pictures of floral arrangements, dress samples, arguments over whether the wedding favors should be custom candles or macarons. It was like I didn't even exist in the process. Again, that silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. I wasn't surprised. This wasn't new. Growing up, Amanda always got the spotlight. Dance recitals, graduation parties, birthday themes that cost more than my entire high school wardrobe. I was the background sibling, the one who didn't need much, the one who figured things out on his own. I thought maybe once I built something of my own they'd notice. Maybe they'd ask what I'd been working on. But no one did. And now here we were. Amanda's big day, her biggest moment, and she hadn't even thought to tell her planner who I was. Or maybe she just didn't care. I finally decided to call her. It had been a week since I kicked Carly out of the venue, and there was no way Amanda hadn't noticed by now. When she answered, her voice was sharp and annoyed, like I was interrupting her afternoon spa appointment. "Can we make this quick?" she snapped. "I'm kind of drowning in cake decisions." "I'll make it quick," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. Carly's no longer involved in the wedding." There was a pause, and then she laughed like I had just told a bad joke. What? That's not up to you." "It actually is," I replied. "Because I own the venue. I've owned it for 2 years. And she was trying to scam you out of $50,000. She lied about a fake price increase and tried to get me to wire the money directly to her. I have proof. Vendor statements, fake invoices. She's done." The silence on her end was instant. I could hear her breathing shift, her posture change. And then she said quietly, "You own the venue?" "Yes," I said. "The winery you booked?" "That's mine. I built it, paid for it, run it." That's how I knew she was full of it the moment she opened her mouth. She didn't speak for several long seconds. Then she asked, almost like a child caught in a lie, "Why didn't you say anything?" I took a deep breath. "Because no one ever asks, Amanda. I could win a Nobel Prize and you'd still call me the quiet one with the laptop. You planned this entire wedding without once checking in with me, and I was fine with that until your planner tried to rob you blind. I stepped in to protect you. You didn't even know you needed protecting." She tried to recover with a joke, something like, "Well, I guess you saved the day, superhero." But it didn't land. There was guilt in her voice, like she knew she'd overlooked something she shouldn't have. She apologized, which I wasn't expecting, and for a moment I almost believed it was sincere. In the days that followed, I took over some of the coordination, not in a showy way, but just to ensure the damage Carly left behind didn't unravel everything. I made calls to the vendors, reassured them, paid out any pending balances personally just to smooth things over. I didn't tell Amanda I was doing it. I didn't want the recognition, I just didn't want her day to fall apart. The wedding crept closer, and for the first time, Amanda actually started checking in with me. Not often, and usually only when something had gone wrong, but it was still more attention than I was used to. She started calling me for advice. Venue lighting, seating layouts, even wine pairings, and I realized she was beginning to see me in a way she never had before. Not just as the little brother who drifted through family holidays, but as someone capable, someone who had built something real. Still, I stayed behind the scenes. I didn't take credit, didn't tell the rest of the family what had happened with Carly. Let them think she just bailed or had a scheduling conflict. Amanda never corrected them, which told me she wasn't ready to admit what she'd let happen. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. The night before the wedding, I was standing at the back of the reception hall, watching the final touches come together. Twinkle lights across the rafters, soft music playing, floral arrangements perfectly placed around the arch where she'd say her vows. I saw Amanda walk in with her fiancé, and for a moment, I thought she might ignore me again. But then she walked over, eyes tired but grateful, and said, "This place is beautiful. Thank you. I didn't realize how much of it was because of you." I nodded. "You're welcome." I didn't need more than that. But as she walked away, she turned back and said something I wasn't expecting. "You were right. I didn't see you. I do now." It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No hugs. But it was enough. Because for the first time in years I felt seen, not just by my sister but by the people I cared about. And all it took was a scammer trying to steal $50,000 from the wrong guy. The morning of the wedding came fast. Somehow, despite the chaos of the weeks before, the venue looked flawless. The vines on the trellis were in full bloom. The lighting was perfect. The sky somehow cooperated, and the staff, my staff, moved like clockwork. I arrived early, mostly to make sure everything was in place, but also because part of me still didn't trust that Amanda wouldn't have some last-minute meltdown that involved me getting yelled at for the wrong kind of champagne flutes. What I didn't expect was for our mom to corner me in the hallway, while holding a tray of tiny perfume bottles that she insisted would be the signature wedding scent. She was dressed to the nines and already slightly flustered, which was never a good combination. She gave me a look I hadn't seen since I was 10 years old and had forgotten to feed the neighbor's cat for a week. "So," she said, not bothering with a greeting, "is it true? You own this place?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, it's mine." She blinked a few times like she was waiting for the punchline, then let out a tiny laugh, except it wasn't amused. It was more confused. "How come I'm just finding out about this now?" I shrugged. "Because nobody ever asked." She stood there, silent, holding her little tray of perfumes like they were proof that she was still in control of the day. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't shrinking under her gaze. I wasn't the overlooked son who only got mentioned when someone's computer wouldn't turn on. I was the guy who owned the place her daughter was getting married in. "I thought you were doing something with apps," she finally muttered. "I was," I said. "Then I did something with land. Then wine. Then events. It's been a few years." She gave a short nod like she didn't know what to do with that information. Then she turned and walked away without another word. I didn't expect applause or pride or some sudden family revelation, but it still stung. There I was, standing in the middle of something I had built, and even now they didn't quite know how to react to it. But that was fine. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for myself. As guests began arriving, I stepped into the background where I always felt most comfortable, behind the scenes, making sure things ran smoothly. No one needed to know that the guy adjusting the audio levels and making sure the florist got paid was also the owner. I liked it that way. I watched Amanda walk down the aisle, radiant in a dress she swore she wouldn't cry in but definitely did. I watched her fiancé, Tom, tear up as she reached the altar. I watched our father, who had said maybe 5 words to me all day, dab his eyes with a napkin like the whole thing was just too much. And I felt something shift. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't pride either. It was clarity. Because despite everything, despite being left out, underestimated, ignored, I had made this happen. I had protected my sister from being taken advantage of. I had saved her wedding from financial disaster. I had given my family something they could never quite give me, stability. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, I was finally able to relax a little. The wine flowed, the music started, and people danced like they hadn't spent the last 3 months tearing each other apart over centerpiece designs. Amanda made her rounds, thanking people, posing for photos, whispering quick comments to her bridesmaids, laughing too hard at things she probably wouldn't remember tomorrow. And then she came over to me. She still looked like the picture-perfect bride. But there was a softness in her face now, like she'd finally stepped out of the performance and into something real. I know I didn't say it the right way, she said quietly, but thank you for everything. I don't even know how close this came to falling apart until I talked to the vendors. You didn't have to do any of that. I nodded. I know. I think I forgot, she said, how capable you are. I think we all did. There was a beat of silence between us. Not awkward, not tense. Just honest. I never needed you to see me a certain way, I replied. But I did need you to respect me. She nodded slowly. You have it. All of it. I didn't need a toast. I didn't need a public announcement. That moment was enough. But then, because the universe apparently wasn't done yet, someone tapped a spoon to a glass and asked for speeches. Amanda stood, holding her champagne, and gave the usual thank you to family and friends. Then she paused, looked directly at me and said, There's one person I need to thank who didn't get nearly enough credit today. My brother. He didn't just help, he saved this wedding. And I'm really sorry it took this long for me to say it out loud. The whole room turned to look at me, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like disappearing. The night ended quietly. After the last song faded and the guests had left, I stood outside the venue alone, watching the string lights flicker above the empty chairs. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that doesn't feel lonely, just earned. Amanda came out still in her gown, holding her shoes in one hand, and sat next to me on the steps. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned her head on my shoulder like we were kids again, like none of the noise had ever happened. It was perfect, she whispered. Better than I deserved. I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I was just glad she saw it now, what I'd done, what I'd built, and who I'd become. And maybe she'd never fully understand the years of being invisible in my own family, but in that moment she saw me. That was enough. Not every story ends in applause. Some end in quiet recognition, in being seen, in earning respect not through loud moments but through action, through doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That night, as the lights dimmed and the world felt still, I finally walked away knowing I wasn't invisible anymore. I was unforgettable.